So something that I definitely think is that I found really interesting was talking about different complexions for makeup and regional differences between members of the same species. He talked about it with the Klingons. He also talked about it with the Tellarites. I think it's really important because especially in recent years, there's been a lot of talk about the Klingon makeup from the 60s and even into the 90s. There's been some controversy about brown face with bumpy foreheads. So I think bringing in more genetic diversity is a really good way to keep kind of the old designs. But I just, wanted to say thank you for considering that kind of thing, but also talk about your thought process in doing that.
Well, the hot button of inclusion is both good and bad, because I think when inclusion is done out of a demand to do it, it can be presented and done in a very disingenuous way. But when it's done out of a reality of there are variations, that's when it feels sincere and when it resonates the most with an audience that feels like, finally, I see me. Where it gets tricky is like with the Klingons, they have been brown for forever. And a lot of times it was African Americans or African complexion that was cast in that role. And then today, the danger of putting brown pigment on a white human being right out of the gate can smack of being insensitive. And it's like, we got to really think through that. Like I said, inclusion, it's like talking about AI right now.
Yes.
It's a hot button, and it can get emotional too soon, to the point where the conversations become heated and less productive. I'm a believer of, like I said earlier, making sure that your decisions are thought out, are thought through, that you're paying attention to who you could offend because of how you've been conditioned. And that's a human perspective in life, and just being a mindful of, I spent 57 years on this planet being a white guy. So can I be appreciative of what a Black woman goes through? And I got to be specific. A Black woman in America, maybe specifically New York or California, what part of California. So you got to really tune in what the point of view is, and what you're being sensitive about. So the goal in life, which affects how you do your work, is to be open to being wrong, is to be open to, I use this as a kind of I wouldn't say I've coined it, but my only belief in something is to not have a belief. My only conviction is to not be convicted. Because once you have conviction in a belief, you run the risk of not growing. You run the risk of being offensive because you haven't seen the other side. You run the risk of not experiencing something that is amazing because you have conviction. And conviction is often seen as an attribute, a positive attribute. And conviction, to me, I find to be the antithesis of positive. It is great to have a strong sense of self and sense of perception, but keep that door open.
Yeah.
Look in that mirror at the potential that you can be better, that your views can be changed, that your God might not be the right God. And I know that those are very, very risky things. They aren't, but it's seemingly risky. Is like, as soon as I lose conviction, I lose control. So when I step into a project where I'm designing a sexy character, I automatically go into intentional self-doubt. Okay, what is sexy? What does sexy mean to our audience that we have to cater this to? And if we're catering to that audience, can we also invert their potential conditioned conviction so that sexy isn't what you think it is. Sexy is so much more. Sexy isn't a woman or a man, or it's both, or it's a hybrid. And
Love that.
and that's where, when someone says to me, or we talk about what it's like to work in Hollywood and work in film, I use the term privilege, particularly when I'm working on things like Star Trek or Avatar or whatever. There's a huge audience. That's a privilege to be a part of in general. And these days, it's a privilege to have any work at all.
Right.
So the other privilege that is the one that you must not squander, is the privilege of communicating design opportunities that are elevated, that are thought through, that aren't cliche, that aren't offensive. And I'll give you a perfect example, which might seem like a strange one, but on Avatar, Jim had the main character, Jake, in a wheelchair. And I was hired as a creature designer for the film. Wheelchair design falls into prop. And how that typically works is the prop designer, prop master, would hire a designer to do a wheelchair design. And the simplest way of dealing with that is you find an illustrator. And I did that in quotes because it's a person who's able to design future stuff. And they come up with a bunch of ideas. And so when Jim was doing it, before I even saw any design ideas, I said to Jim, just so you know, prior to stepping into Avatar, I spent about 8 years working as a wheelchair designer. I worked with occupational therapists, physical therapists, all sorts of disabilities, from quad, high neck injury to low lumbar injury, geriatric, pediatric, a lot. And we built, my business partner at the time, Scott Robertson, he and I designed and built wheelchairs for wheelchair users. If you have a designer, an entertainment designer, design a wheelchair, and it's one of those cool looking fantasy designs that we pedestrians who walk around go, what a cool wheelchair. But a wheelchair user watches the movie like Avatar and goes, great, you clearly didn't consult a wheelchair user. You didn't consult, you didn't even, not even consult, you didn't even think about us. And that's the problem. Avatar didn't do that. I stuck my neck out. Jim's a smart guy. He probably has the foresight to do that. But I just said, hey, I'm here. You can ask me questions. It ended up, we used one of our wheelchair ideas, and that's what is in the movie. But it's one of those things where, you know, do you stick your neck out and say, hey, by the way, not only am I designing creatures, but sometimes you have to speak up and toot your own horn, because I was a specialist in that industry for several years, along with this guy, Scott. That's the type of inclusion that's important. Those simple little oversights that can easily happen, of not casting that particular demographic or that person. And I make it a point to doubt myself and choices, and ask questions like, I don't know, why is this alien a guy? Why are you designing a guy alien? And not many people know this, and I might get in trouble for saying this, but when Brian and I were talking about Saru, we wanted him to be somewhat ambiguous in its sexuality. And we didn't want Saru to be seen as a macho character or a hyper feminine character. And what are those again? And so it was great. And this is what I love about working with Brian, is we had these conversations that were very complex and potentially controversial as to, is Saru gay? And if he is, he's an alien. Maybe he's not gay. Maybe that alien race, that is the way they are. So that is not gay. And now we get to challenge our audience with what that is. Do we want to go there? Now, the guy who's sculpting the shape of Saru, what does it have to do with anything? Technically nothing, but it makes a whole lot of sense if I know every single thing about this character to take advantage of the potential of planting a seed of what the aesthetic can yield and can provoke in an audience. So even though I don't have a lot of say in what characters are, I do get to contribute by my personal views and sensitivity to inclusion. By I can't tell you how many times I have proposed a character be of color, an alien character, whether the alien is of color or the performer is of color, because it's just kind of a given in a lot of scenarios that you do a white male as a foundation for an alien, even if it's a digital alien. And so oftentimes I think, oh, shouldn't this be, and I wish I could tell you, but there's a major character coming up in a major thing soon that I felt, of all the characters that must be of color, this one must be. And it was embraced.
That's awesome.
Not because
cool.
I have any profound prediction of what was right and wrong, but it was just one of those things where, like, yeah, I wish I could tell you more, actually, because it's a, let's talk in 6 months.
Okay. Hey,
Okay,
I would love
definitely.
to. Would love to.
This again.
Yeah, would love
And
to.
we'll see if I'm right. It might be in 6 months that character comes out and everyone's like, this is awful. And I will not be taking any calls.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Well, on a bit of a lighter topic, let's talk about Picard as a mass murderer.
Yes.
Julian and I were very lucky to go to Mission Chicago, and we got to see the skulls you designed on display.
Yeah.
And they're amazing. Can you talk a little bit about
Goosebumps.
them? Yeah, just
well, may I ask you why you thought they were amazing? Because they are just skulls.
they are just skulls, but there's just like, check the aesthetic. Like, I love me a skull. But there's just seeing the alienness beneath the skulls, like it makes them feel so much more real, because I know that these, intellectually, I know these are human people with, makeup on them, but seeing the skulls, it makes them feel more real to me. So
Yeah.
I would say something else, but that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, it's just the fact that, wow, this is the anatomy behind, like, the flesh and the blood and the muscle. Like, this is just really freaking cool. Yeah.
That's I'm so glad I asked you that question, because I didn't expect that to be the answer. That is how I think of it, because that's the way it needed to be.
Yeah.
And you start with the makeup and you work your way in, and you have to think of it as a anthropologist, reconstructing what a Cro-Magnon man looks like in the flesh, by taking a skull and adding the appropriate muscle mass and skin and fatty tissue. So this was the inverse process of, we got a masseter here, so we remove that, the bone is probably there. So again, the cart can't lead the horse. I don't know if that's the right analogy in this scenario, because the cart is leading the horse, where the makeup exists first. So you're reverse engineering the skeleton. And it's one of my favorite things. I have so many, probably like yourself, Emcee, I've got so many skulls and things around me that I've always referenced anatomy so that I could do my job as plausibly as possible. So when it came time to do this, I had already done a Klingon skull for the torchbearer suit. I knew that I wanted a skull motif somewhere, so I'd already gone through the process. And then when it came up, hey, we're thinking of buying some skulls and adding some Bondo to them to make it look, I said, do not do that. Please do not do that. And Vincent was the same way. It's like, we love skulls too much, that we both did a lot for free.
Oh, wow. Nice.
We did, and Vincent more than I. It's like there wasn't the money, the time, and they didn't need to have more money and time to do what they needed to do to be effective for that moment. We wanted it to be so much more. It's like, oh, but we know skulls. I'm not a professional by any means, but I know enough that you're going to get the best possible thing from me because I'm committed and I got a bunch of skulls around me to reference at the very least. And we had 3D printing on our side, which meant like hand sculpting a skull can be done, obviously. But the speed at which they needed it to shoot meant 3D sculpting and 3D printing were the only ways you could pull this off. And of course, the argument was, yeah, but if I took a plastic skull from some toy store, some Halloween store, and put Bondo on it, it's like, yeah, if you do that, count me out. I'm out of here. You can't do that. So I was told which ones they wanted to do. And I asked, if not pleaded, can we have another one that isn't canon, sort of isn't canon, one that is a brand new species just to spice it up a bit? And ironically, guy is right here.
Oh,
I just happen to have these guys in my office, which is nice. This one has the jaw. The one you saw didn't have the jaw. But this particular alien named Lindsay, the species, was the design was done for Star Trek Beyond of the character. And like any project, you do a ton of different designs. This one just never made the cut. So we got thrown in the garbage / a hard drive. And as we're designing aliens for the next Star Trek, Picard, whatever, Discovery, we'll go back to those files and say, this was a good design. It just wasn't, I felt it was a good design, just not chosen for this. So this particular character, I always loved what it could be. And I thought, let's stick it in there because maybe we can come back to this and make it a real thing. And he's got a whole lot of stuff going on, as you may recall, like the way it breathes through its top of its head like a dolphin. He's got 2 skull chambers for brain, which makes it sort of an apex predator in that you could smash one and it could still function. And there's a whole lot of stuff going on inside of the cavities, and it's a very thoroughly thought out little guy. Getting heavy. So, and then I think my favorite one canon was this guy. And it's my favorite not only because we love the character and absolutely love what Vincent Van Dyke did with the prosthetic, but the controversy of the ear bones that many people had a strong opinion about. And every choice, as mentioned, it has to have a reason beyond subjectivity. And why? Because this is eventually going to be on display somewhere that I am not. So I'm going to have to answer to these choices. And I try and make sense of every single choice. So the ear thing, the debate of cartilage, you don't see cartilage in museums and skulls and stuff. It's like, wrong, you do. If you've ever seen a shark skull on display or a shark skeleton or any kind of fish, not mammal, but true osteolost, I think is the technical term, fish, you can preserve cartilage. So I always thought, why do people get so passionately they go down this path with these convictions of, you don't see cartilage in skulls, you wouldn't see ear bones. Like, it's science fiction and it's an alien, so maybe it's a hybrid of bone and cartilage.
People forget the science, the fiction and the science fiction part so much when they, and I don't want to say too many horrible things about fans, but it can just get like a bit ridiculous, like from that point of view.
It can. And where I can be harsh on fans is because I am a fan of stuff, is you got to just enjoy it. Unless somebody totally obliterates something out of stupidity, then yeah, call them out. But there are certain things where you just got to trust that people are doing the homework and putting the effort into it, and enjoy the ride. There are other things if you have that energy to like reach out and write that long paragraph of hate, put that into something where there's value. You know, there's a lot of things to really apply your energies to, and Ferengi ear bones is not one of them, even if I'm wrong. And I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm saying I had justification for it. You can preserve cartilage, so okay, we get to do that. And B, it was necessary. Without it, it was less Ferengi, iconically. So I thought, okay, we need to have that, and if we need to have it, let me see if I can justify it. Let me do my homework real quick. Yep, sharks on display, cartilage can be preserved. And B, ours is because it's a Ferengi, it's an alien, it's a hybrid of calcified bone as it transitions into tendon, et cetera, et cetera. There are ways to like legitimately qualify an aesthetic choice. So, and to carry on with the bone thing, I have a lot of stuff in my office.
Same.
There's
Gul Dukat.
These guys, and this is one of those opportunities where, okay, it's got to look like them. So what are the things that make us think Cardassian? There's a ridge that they have, and so we want to echo that in the bone. And I'm making references to alligator skulls because the closer the skin is to bone, the more texture there is for adhesion, etc. But then there's a choice like this here, which is a cosmetic choice to a degree. It's a little bone shape that sticks out. And why is it there? Well, these guys are sort of lizard-like.
Yeah.
And I would imagine like a Komodo dragon or an alligator, they'd have some pretty significant bite strength. So if they're going to have significant bite strength, you want to have those bony protuberances that would accommodate attachment points of larger muscle. So having this be an extended version gives them a temporalis muscle that goes down into the top of the mandible here, which would give them greater bite strength. So this is a design philosophy that is applied to skulls that is applied to everything I do in design. And that is, you want to have something visually interesting for the audience, but it can't be superfluous or arbitrary or personal. But you can have the cart lead the horse, which is, can I put a cool shape here and then have a reason for it? So if you have enough of a library mentally, or willingness to go to your library, if you've purchased one, to go online and do the research, you can come up with ways to legitimately justify subjective cosmetic choices. So this being the biggest one of all, which is, why is there a hole in his head? Well, there's that spoon shape that I had nothing to do with, that other designers did. I searched for their choices. Why did they do it? And the best I got was that it was sexual dimorphism. It could do all these other things in terms of it has a potential to be a gland. And I thought, okay, there's not enough there that says it is what it is, so I can now roll with it. And being that it is sort of a third eye, there's an element of referencing, if you're familiar with tantric yogi, chakra, it's like, okay, we got a chakra thing here. Should I go that route? And then I thought, well, they're lizards, sort of, they got lizard scales and stuff. Why not tap into their superpowers and have that be a parietal eye? It's the third eye that a lot of lizards has. It's an eye that's kind of on top of their heads. And that is a simple sensory translucent membrane that allows a lizard to detect light or dark. You can't really see objects with it. And I thought, why can't this be that extra sensory type of parietal organ? And we don't know what it is underneath. There's no information online. So I thought that's enough to come up with a shape and justify what's underneath that spoon shape and have a story, biological story behind it, of it being sort of a parietal eye. Eye in big quotes, because that sensory thing can, because it's alien, it can be that it is sensory in ways that we have no concept of. You know, does it see color in a different way? Does it sense emotions? Don't know, but it's that kind of sensory organ. So again, there are opportunities as a designer to have a strong idea and direction, but allow yourself kind of this openness to information so that you can grow with a trajectory, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does.
And call that a life perspective, and that's how I do tend to operate, whether design is making me behave as a person, or as a person it makes me operate as designer in a particular way. But I'm finding curiously that my philosophies of design are a direct parallel to my philosophies of how I conduct myself in life.
Wow. I'm like floored right now. That was incredible. Oh my God.
I could be wrong.
The amount,
no conviction.
but like the amount that you go into about, like, oh man, just like you think about every single possible detail, and that's just like
as much as time allows.
No, but
Yeah.
like as a fan, like it's super appreciative of that. You know, it's, you're not just doing makeup. You know, you're thinking about like so much of, you know, what this, like, these aliens that we watch every week and maybe don't even think that much about, like, what really goes into making them who they are. And I find that just incredible. So yeah.
Thank you. And, you know, everyone who are involved in these creations, because obviously there's a costume designer doing a version of what I'm doing, and they're thinking the same way. There's the performer who gets a script and reads those few words that is their character. But if they're a great artist and dedicated to their craft, they're thinking about backstory, they're thinking about motivations and all the things that aren't in the script. And the sum of the parts should yield something pretty wonderful. And that sum of the parts includes how craft service had enough good snacks that everyone tummy was comfortable, so that when they're performing or lighting or doing whatever, everyone's just feeling good about what it is they're doing. And this is the culture a great producer and director creates for their environment of artists to work in. And you can get caught up in just the myopic, I'm doing this one thing and I'm going to scream at people so that they do what I'm telling them to do. And you can end up with a good product, but that's the destination.
Yeah.
The journey is so much more important. Because we who work on these films work on many different destinations. Some are great, some are not at all. But the journey that we all aspire to have is that healthy, creative, collaborative, positive experience where you grow as an artist and a person. And that's, if I have a few goals, big goals in life. One of them is that I'm not going to go if, I'm going to say when I am directing a major thing. Nice. On the small stuff that I have directed, I've had the opportunity unconsciously to create those environments that people like J.J. Abrams, Joe Kosinski, et cetera, Ridley Scott have afforded me to experience, which is, it just feels good to be here and to do the work. And, you know, it's not hard, actually.
Yeah.
It's the funny thing
love
is
what you do, right? Too.
Yeah. How can you not love being paid to be an artist? It's whatever form that is. But how ridiculous is it that you hear these horror stories of TV shows and films where the environment is so hostile and negative? It's like, why?
Yeah.
We are not changing the world much. A little, yeah, I get that. But until a pain in the ass director has a cure for cancer or a cure for proper distribution of food and resources, we're just making movies. We're just making entertainment. It should be this is easy by comparison. So that's where I can kind of navigate some of the hostile waters that we're in on occasion is because, like, I've been very fortunate to travel around the world and see things both incredible and horrible, have experiences both incredible and horrible, that it keeps me grounded in the realities of what it is you do. And, I remember one meeting I had on a production that people know of where I was being yelled at about the teeth. I was just about to use the exact words. His gosh darn teeth are not big enough, and I don't know why you can't, do your job. And it was this hostile argument about teeth, and in my head, I was hearing them, but I'm thinking of things that I have recently been through and other people have been through that were real things that mattered.
Yeah.
And I knew the size of the teeth would not matter in this scenario. And I just thought to myself, it's an important conversation to have, but again, the energy of some people being so hostile about things, it's like, let's get a little perspective here.
Yeah.
This is teeth we're talking about, and it matters, but it doesn't matter to berate people in a meeting. That's you're flexing your muscles, you're trying to show who you are, you're yeah. This is a privilege to be a part of. Let's not forget that.
Yeah. Well, I actually want to keep it on hostile environments for a minute, and I think it's actually a great way to finish, because we're going to talk about the Borg, which definitely are a hostile environment, right?
Mhm.
Borg cubes and a hostile species. But reading the book, I mean, I was excited for you. Like, I felt your excitement bleeding through that you got to work on the Borg. Such a major part of all 3 seasons of Picard's journey, right? Can you talk about just, I'm going to kind of combine all these questions in the interest of time, just working with, creating the XB, studying trauma scars, like ex-cancer patients, amputees, and then also getting to work on just like one of the most iconic villains ever, the Borg Queen, from working with the late and wonderful Annie Wersching. Go into the Borg, because I'm sure that was a blast for you.
It was the coveted, I think that's the word I used in the book, the coveted design. Everyone, that's rather presumptuous. Everyone wants to design the Borg. I don't care who you are. Elon Musk wanted to do it. He couldn't. I did it.
Thank God.
It would have been different.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about the Borg is, when I didn't realize that I was designing the Borg Queen when I was working on 7 of 9, because that little implant, detail, which was a redesign of the existing. And again, like any challenge where we want to have it be evolved, but not different, but it needs to be totally different, but the same. It's like, what is that? I chose certain language, shape language, stylistic language. Again, there wasn't a whole lot of time, so I'm kind of having to hustle and making those decisions. But they all felt to me right, and they were approved, and that's what became the characters' new iconic. It wasn't like they took them out and upgraded them and put them back in here. It was like we're doing the whole Worf at the beginning of a season and the end of another season. So we collectively agreed that was a good thing. But if you're going to be true to such a profoundly significant character, 7 of 9, we can't ignore that now. So here we are designing the Borg XB stuff, which was a little easier because the Queen wasn't on the books when we were doing XB. It was just XB. And I thought, oh, darn, XB. It's not even really the Borg. They're stripped of their stuff. So I didn't quite get my Borg on, if that's a word.
It is now.
Yeah, where I was doing XB, but there was my favorite thing, kind of like the skulls. It's like, what's underneath the costume? And the hardest thing is when you are a designer like me, who likes to understand how things work and what the reasons are behind things, and you start to really scrutinize the Borg and truly try and understand why they are the way they are, it's a tough thing. And I was about to say, I want to be careful how I say this. I can't be careful. I can only say what it is. When they were designing the Borg back in the day, there's a level of suspension of disbelief that existed back then, in the same way that when they were designing Godzilla back in the day, that particular Godzilla does not survive, at least for Western audiences today, because it's just not the same. Audiences have evolved because of what they have ingested over time from shows like Discovery Channel and Nat Geo and how things work. So people are much more savvy. So there's an obligation to try and understand what it is you're doing. But when you go back to the original Borgs, that was back then, it was okay to stick a tube in the side of the head and call it a day, because we all went, oh, that's amazing, that's crazy, and that's weird. But then today, we couldn't have done that specific. I mean, I guess we could have, but in my opinion, it would not have been as evolved as it needed to be. And I love the challenge of take somebody else's design, don't change it because that's rude, but figure out what it is that they did and then try to have it make sense to today's audience's perceptions as well as the technologies that we have today. Simplest thing, 4K freeze frame versus 8-track tape, laser disc at best. The fidelity of the design has to be much higher. How it's glued to somebody's body has to be that much better because we can see the detail much more. So there's those things you have to factor into it. But I was trying to understand, when a tube comes out of the temple and goes into the jawbone, what is it doing? What fluids are we channeling through it? And tubes, designers and tubes are a whole separate thing. We put them on because they're cool. Designers and little LED points of light. Okay, that stuff makes no sense. You got these SWAT guys coming through stealth, but they're covered in little spots of light. Why? Because it looks cool. And I agree. So tubes are the same thing. It's like tubes are the worst thing from an engineering standpoint because they snag on stuff, right, but they're the best thing for science fiction. So that's where I'm looking at these designs going, what is the fluid being pumped? Why is it going from this part of the body to the other part of the body? Wouldn't it be done under the skin, subdermal? So you start thinking about it. And as I was redesigning them in my head, I thought, you know what? This is a perfect time, Neville, where you don't need to know why, and you just do what the Borg is. Just do it maybe with a more elegant interface, because we have more time right now. And that was a tough thing for me to do because my brain does not think that way. But then you turn it off. It's like, this is kind of fun. I don't know and don't care why that tube goes there and goes into there. So when we're doing the XB, it needed to encapsulate the Borg vibe, but possess a touch of rationale and what we established with 7 of 9. So the XB were fairly easy to do in that regard, but then we were getting to the point of doing a full Borg costume. We learned a lot about the money spent on the Torchbearer suit, so we're going to be doing that one again. So that one, and if we're rolling now into a more fleshed out Borg, which is our Borg Queen, now, that was the moment of like, oh my God, we're not just doing a Borg, we're doing the Queen. So, man, so excited to be a part of that. So excited to work with Vincent Van Dyke on it. And again, that was, let's him and I talk first to talk about what, and I like to do this as well. I'm at a point in my career, and dare I say, a tiny bit of authority where I'm allowed to manage departments, to where I can do the things that I always felt were of more value to the production. And that is, rather than, okay, design a thing and then give that to the makeup artist, I would sit down with Vincent and say, hey, Vincent, okay, we're doing the Borg Queen, you and I, granted our teams, and that's amazing. What have you personally always wanted to do? whether it's a technical thing or a cosmetic thing. What have you always really wanted to challenge yourself doing? And mine is a little bit simpler because I got to do the Borg Queen. But is there something technically you've wanted to do where we have lights in the back of the head? We got servo motors driving, whatever. And let's see if that makes sense. And he might say, I've always wanted to do, a glowing tongue that comes out. It's like, okay, that's not so what else? And Vincent's a super collaborative and very smart human being, but also in terms of the technical side of makeup, that he had all sorts of really cool ideas of what he thought the makeup could be technically. And so it was a delicate dance of just like conversations and thumbnail sketches of, hey, Vincent, what if we did this? Is it possible? And then he would say, I'll do you one better, Neville. What if we did that to it? And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, we can do that? Because I didn't know that we could do that as a makeup. And so by having that dialogue and that openness to let Vincent or somebody else almost tell me what it should be, you just end up with something better. You really do. So we designed it together from a technical point of view. And I love Vincent enough to where I really count every point of view he has. So it wasn't just the technical side. I would show him an image and say, what do you think? And he's like, I think the graphics are a little too heavy handed. Like, oh shoot, I really like those, but I hear you. And, we design it together. And then we get to the point where we're pitching it to Kurtzman and the showrunners. And when we're pitching it, they can react to it cosmetically, but we can say, they're like, this is amazing, but that's like 12 hours in a chair. Ron Perlman wouldn't even put up with this. It's like, no. Vincent, how long will this take? James McKinnon, how long do you think you can do this? And they would then chime in. We've had the conversation already, and we know that what we're presenting to you is viable. The cosmetics, that's debatable because that's subjective. But that part was the challenge. 7 of 9 established a particular look. Now, I didn't intentionally go into any of this with, I want this to be H.R. Geiger in any way, but it was unavoidable. Because when you start thinking of the Borg Queen, the original, and the inspirations they were referencing, Captain EO, and Captain EO had a particular character which was very, very much H.R. Giger. And then it was just a simple thing of coming out of the rafters and tubes. It's like, there's no getting around it.
Back to the tubes.
Yep, back to the tubes, which is fine. But that's been used so much, and it's such a Alien, the movie thing, and Captain EO thing that I thought I'd just lean into it. Let's embrace it because it is what it is, but it needs to be our own. So I take no offense when people say, oh, it looked just like something Giger would do. I was like, oh, thank you, because I think he's amazing. But I never once held a picture open of Giger's work and thought, I think it's got to be just like that. It may have happened because those images are in my head. But having the appropriate person be the queen, I couldn't wait for them to cast whomever it was, because it was going to design our queen a lot. And I knew because it was performance based, I wasn't going to have much of an opportunity to say, I really think you should go with this actor versus this one because their eyes are better for this. But they picked the perfect looking person. And when she was cast, I always like to, like with Mary Chieffo, spend a bit of time with the actor and understand their needs. And when Annie was cast and she was going in for her life cast, that's when I typically run over to Vincent, say, and try and get to know the person. And so she's wearing basically a trash bag so she can have a life cast. And I see underneath her skin, and I'm familiar with catheters of sorts. I saw this and I said, oh, are you comfortable with an appliance being glued on top of that, just pure. I wasn't asking questions like, oh, what do you got? Why
Right.
is that there? That wasn't appropriate for me to ask. But what I felt was appropriate was to make the query of, is this something you want to hide, or is this something you're okay showcasing? Because I think I have an idea, which is, let's take you, Annie, and whatever this is all about, don't have to tell me, and let's mirror it. Let's make it two Borg ports. This is part of you because you're essentially Borgified. And that's kind of, is that something you want to celebrate? Is that something you want to showcase? Or should we just make it discreet and not part of it? She's like, no, go for it. And so you immediately knew that Annie was kind of up for quite a lot, because it was a involved makeup. And I said this at one of our cons, that her head was just ideal because it was very symmetrical, thank goodness, because of just the technical thing of making this crown fit. But her skin was very freckly. She has very Irish looking skin and hair, very fair. And Vincent, that usually is it's going to be so hard now because of all these freckles. And Vincent thought, this is perfect. Let's use her skin and let it be a part of the Queen. So there was a lot of really wonderful serendipitous things coming from the casting of Annie that aren't often there. I mean, right down to she was comfortable in the makeup. Whether she was or wasn't, I think she was comfortable. She was certainly gracious to not complain. But I know that Vincent and the team made her as comfortable as possible. And when we saw the performances, the dailies, it was one of those, I hope this is going to work. I think it's going to work. And it worked so well. And that's a combination of many different people. How you light the Borg Queen makes it feel immersive or not. And it was just such an idyllic period of Picard. I don't think of Annie as gone.
Yeah.
Because if I do, I'll be getting too emotional. I can't, I'm not there yet. But I don't feel that she is, because that's the wonderful thing about that level of character that somebody gets to play. They get to live on. A great musical artist, that you listen to that song and they've been gone a long time. There's not a lot of people that shed tears, emotional, uncontrollable tears when they listen to Beethoven, because he's dead. And that's because the legacy that he has left behind is profound. And I think that I might be manufacturing some of this for personal reasons, but I think that Annie's legacy for a lot of us is not just that she was the Queen, dare I say the final Queen, but just how she did it and how she went through it from start to finish of the character. And the fact that, not that anyone should get points for concealing their condition, cancer, because people say, they died with grace, etc., and courage. I think we got to be careful when we say that for those who die in anguish, not wanting to leave. And that's not disgraceful. That's not out of grace. Everyone deals with things their own way. But the fact that she chose to keep it a secret, and I remember hugging her at WonderCon a couple years ago, because we hadn't seen each other in a long time, and there's certain people that love in a way that's pure of heart, and I didn't expect Annie to be that way, because she was just such a cool character in so many different shows, and she was a name, and she was accomplished, and she was attractive, and I just thought she's I don't know what to expect here. But the moment I met her in the life cast, I thought, this is a pretty special woman. And how she communicated throughout the whole process, I just thought, I'm dealing with a real person here. And how it ended was so abrupt that, again, it's like, I don't know, you're not gone. And again, it might be me manufacturing something here, but she is not gone, because she embodied such an important character for so many of us, and we get to see her live on in celluloid, for lack of a better word. I'm rambling on because I will get emotional, because I did care for her a great deal, so I should just stop rambling and just say that one of the greatest opportunities that we all can have is to work on character that is so beloved. I feel blessed in getting to design Borg Queen. And I guess in a way, that's part of my legacy. Should I die after this podcast, it's a wonderful opportunity to have been a part of that. And I think that Annie recognizes that as well. And she was in it, and knowing potentially where her life was going while doing it. So there's a lot that can be learned from living right to the very end, as best as you can. And she was afforded the opportunity to live it pretty damn well. So again, Star Trek is a very special show in that its length of time it's existed, and the various people that have participated behind the scenes and as performers. I can't speak enough in positive about how Star Trek as a culture, in making the product and fans that are a part of it, is one of the most positive places to reside, because everyone wants it to be a great experience making it and consuming it. That the culture and the family that is born out of that is genuine, and that's a rare thing to be a part of. And I think that's the best thing that Star Trek has offered all of us who are involved, and that includes you guys.
Appreciate that.
I mean, why do you love it so much? Yeah, there's great writers and great visual effects and all that, but man, it is probably the largest family, other than like Dungeons and Dragons and types of things that bring people together for years. And the same Dungeons and Dragon nerd mentality is who we are as Star Trek. Do you guys do D&D?
We have a lot of friends who do.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah.
it's part of our world.
Yeah,
going to
it
Comic-Con
is.
and seeing people dress up.
Yeah,
That's we're a specific
really
makeup of people. I don't have tattoos, and I tend to wear a suit and tie, but I'm the exact same. If I had freaking hair, it'd be purple.
You make the suit and tie look great.
Well, it's the other people that are filming it.
Right. Yeah. Neville, that's wow, a beautiful way to end. I just wanted to say too, really quick. I had the pleasure of meeting Annie at Chicago before she passed. So she is just a wonderful soul, and I'm glad that you got to have that kind of experience with her. And I agree with you. She's never gone. People are never truly gone. They kind of live on, and especially being blessed with this industry in TV and film. So I want to thank you so much, because this is just one of the most in-depth and wonderful interviews that we've gotten to do.
Thank you.
Taking a great portion of your day today to speak with us. And specifically about, I'm going to plug it again because we have to, this just not because we have to, because we want to, this beautiful new book, The Art of Neville Page. It is out now. You should absolutely pick it up. Not because we're getting paid or anything to say that.
Nor am I, just so you know.
Yeah, because it is just amazing. I read it in a night. It is just awesome. I want to ask you, where can people find the book? What if you have coming up? I know that it's kind of a gray area right now with being able to, talk about upcoming material with the strike, and then also where can people find you?
Well, as for the book, I should know where you can get it. I know you can get it on Amazon.
Right.
Is that the place where you should get it? I don't know. I have a few here on the floor if you want to come by.
Hey.
But I think I got to get one to my mom and dad. The book, and I think it's important to point out, particularly since it seems promo-ish, you guys aren't getting money for it. I'm not getting money for the book. I don't get money for the book. That's not a complaint. I'm just saying that you buying the book, the point should be because you like Star Trek and you like the information inside of it. I would love to make money from the book, but again, the book is a standalone thing that is for you, the people that love Star Trek and what goes into it. In which a lot of the book, by the way, I did my best. I don't know, you read it just recently, to point out the other people who are
You
involved
did.
in it, because the book is not, it is called The Art of Neville or whatever it's called. The stuff that you love is the end result of my efforts, with a ton of people in between that elevate it and bring it to the screen the way you see it. So I'm merely a cog in the mechanism. What's coming up for me, there are some things in the works. We of course have the new season of Discovery coming out, and there's Strange New Worlds, which is on hold, and there's a bunch of stuff in the works in that regard. I've been fortunate to have been writing and directing this past few years in between breaks between episodes of Star Trek, and we've got a proof of concept short coming out, hopefully in October, called Coalescence. It's a World War I drama science fiction, which is everything that we've spoken about in this podcast in terms of my approach to designing stuff is applied to this as a feature, in that I'd like to think it's well thought out and it has value way beyond entertainment, because there's no point in not. So I've been developing a bunch of stuff in the hopes of producing and directing some of them. And because of where we're at with the strike, can't really get into too much detail. But if something comes up to where it's like, hey guys, it's gonna hit the silver screen, I'll let you know. I'm doing more speaking events now. I've traveled the world talking about experience in film, talking about how design applies itself to companies that don't do creature design. I think it's a philosophy that can be applied to any industry pretty much. I wouldn't say surgery, maybe, is where you don't want me involved inspiring people. You might linger a bit looking at somebody's organs if you did one of my workshops. But the thing that I like to do with speaking events is talk about the experience I've had as a designer. But like I say, a lot of the philosophies that apply to design apply to how you are in relationships. It really, really does. Being open to being wrong, as an example. If you want to have great communication in a relationship, you better be open to looking in the mirror and going, did I do it right? Did I say the right thing? Do I have the right point of view? And that's the only way to answer questions and evolve as a being on this planet, whether it's a designer or just a plain old human being. So that is where I'm headed.
Very nice. Very nice. And I believe you're on Instagram, right? We could find you at Neville Page on there to see some stuff.
Yeah.
Not much.
I don't know how,
socials.
I tend not to, and it's not
fair.
because I'm opposed to it.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a time thing.
It is. Yeah,
I got a 5-year-old, and if I've got extra time, I shouldn't be shooting a selfie.
Yeah, fair.
But I do realize the importance of it. I wish I spent more time on it. But yes, you can find me on Instagram if you want minimal inspiration.
Yeah.
I'm now for the first time in years, putting together a website again.
Oh, great.
And that, keep an eye on it. It's nevillepage.me. Okay. If you go there now, you'll discover that it is under construction and there's probably stuff in it that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, that's about the extent of it. I'm on Twitter for abuse.
As all we are.
Feel free to reach out and say something crass, no matter if what I'm saying is talking about how to make a chocolate cake.
Very nice.
Twitter.
Oh, Twitter.
I blame Twitter, but it's the public, man. We all need to learn to be a little bit nicer.
We sure do. Well, This was very nice. This was a pleasure. Thank you again, Neville Page, everyone. That is going to do it for this very special edition of the pod. So for MC, for Neville, I am Julian. I will say live long and prosper and have a wonderful night. We'll see you again soon.
Likewise, guys. Take care.
Take care.